So let me explain how the Bible was compiled and how it was canonized. It's not the works of Jesus or the sayings of Jesus that were specifically grouped together into a book. Those kind of Gospels were actually rejected, like the Gospel of Thomas. It's purely the sayings of Jesus. No. What the Gospels that have been put into the Bible are merely just the work of community Christian leaders during the first 100 to 200 years after Jesus. And what they were doing was they were writing down their own interpretations and of the oral transmissions they've heard, the rumors, the stories, all this. They wrote it down into their own interpretation as a book for their own community. And over time, some interpretations became more popular than others. And then these became Gospels. And then these Gospels were, during the time where Christianity attained state support, became picked and supported by the church for its doctrines it carries. So any gospel which would support a particular church faction, whatever, was taken and favorited by that church faction. And when a specific faction, the Trinitarian Catholics, gained control and they were given state backing, their doctrine became the doctrine that was used to pick which gospels were the true gospels. And ever since that time, Christians have been following. Books were just chosen by them. Speak to a Catholic. What would a Catholic say to you? A Catholic are against people who are sola scriptura, people who believe that they only need the book. One Catholic friend said to me that the reason why I need the church is because the Bible did not come with a contents page. It didn't tell you what meant to go in it. They freely admit, the Catholics, this very institution that picked and canonized the Bible, they freely admit that they picked it because that's what they wanted. And they hoped that what they wanted, or they believed that what they wanted, was just divinely inspired anyway. So whatever they picked was the will of God.
At the particular time, there was men who were used as God's instruments in producing these things.
So are you saying that the Spirit was present, countering bias, ignorance, or even prejudice in the formation of the canon?
Well, I think when you have a human group, there is bias, ignorance, and prejudice present. I mean, that's just the human reality. But hopefully, when you have this large group of people working together, that the final outcome is the outcome that was desired by the Spirit. Hopefully, 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 hopefully.
And therefore, this is what the Catholics would say, and they are against Protestants, saying that Protestants don't have the divine authority. And the very fact that you believe in the Bible that the Catholics picked showed that you have to believe at some point that the church had authority. Because there was in reality no criteria that they used. Didn't exist. The only criteria that they used was just the criteria of did they agree with it or not? Did it suit their own opinions or not? And as we shall prove that the Bible itself was actually edited and re-edited later on to further harmonize out the kind of contradictions amongst it and to iron out any problems it had and to put pro-church doctrine into the script itself.
The thing is, when you're looking at the Gospels, we don't know it's true. There are no independent archaeological records where you can check things up. No one was out there with a camcorder, recording these things. There wasn't even anyone taking notes, as far as we know. So a lot of it we're being asked to take on trust. We don't know precisely who Mark is. He doesn't sort of sign his book at the end and say, this is where I've come from, this is who I am. I don't think Mark himself is an eyewitness. For a start, he never actually says, I did this, I did the other. So he's not even claiming to be an eyewitness. These oral traditions have found their way to Mark.
That the first gospel writer was relying on hearsay is a bit of a thunderbolt. Then you realise that lots of Jesus' story isn't even there in the earliest Mark manuscripts. No nativity, no long sermons, no resurrection appearances. In the end, it's less a record of events than a self-help guide that says suffering and persecution are the best way to God.
Mark is the creative genius that gets this whole process of writing Gospels going. In a way, it's quite an arrogant, quite a conceited thing to do, to say, I'm going to do an authoritative version of this story. It has a kind of propaganda purpose, I think. Well, most people might think first off that Matthew's Gospel is written by Matthew, the tax collector, one of the 12 disciples. When you look at the document carefully, you see that the Gospel doesn't look like the product of an eyewitness. So who is this character? Well, the most important thing of all about Matthew is this is clearly a Jewish writer that knows all about the habits and the ways and the laws of Judaism.
Rather than go back to the drawing board, Matthew started by copying large chunks of Mark's Gospel, then rewriting or adding his own bits.
In the ancient world, there's no copyright laws, and you can just copy stuff out, and Matthew does. I mean, sometimes word for word.
Isn't this just plagiarism?
I think the thing is, you'd have to say that if Matthew was writing today, you could take him to court for plagiarism. There's no question about it. What Matthew, I think, is trying to do is supplant Mark. He's trying to take it over. Matthew thinks that Mark's pick of Jesus isn't quite right. He knows that Jesus was a Jew, and he knows that Jesus was more Jewish than Mark is inclined to paint him. So if you like, he goes through the process of almost re-Judaizing Jesus and making him more Jewish.
So Matthew adds the Christmas story, the Sermon on the Mount, and the Lord's Prayer, all pointing to Jesus as the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. And this is probably why his book ends up with top billing in the New Testament. So is Matthew the first salesman of a Jewish Jesus?
I think so. I think one of the things he wants to do is he wants to make Jesus a son of Abraham, a son of David, painting like Moses.
Most people read this gospel as history, but you're suggesting it's propaganda. How do you hold that together as a Christian?
I think the thing is, it's not a case of either or. It's not a case of just because something's got a bit of spin, just because something's trying to tell a particular story to a particular group of people, that it's not got any history.
By this point in the late 1st century AD, the tone's been set for the Gospels, and it was all about being a consummate spin doctor. Like Luke, an educated man based in Greece, Luke focuses on taking